Okay, let's dive into this because today's explainer covers what is genuinely one of the most wild and, frankly, conceptually dense frameworks we've ever looked at. We're unpacking a philosophy that makes a massive claim. The time value of pure mathematics is literally infinite. And the ultimate goal here? Oh, it's extracting limitless fiat wealth right out of the everyday transactional economy, all by leveraging transfinite mathematics. It's this crazy system that perfectly bridges abstract logic, religious architecture, and, well, pure financial extraction.
Now, just look at the unapologetic energy of this quote from the source texts. I mean, they actually call it the Skrilla quotient. The entire bizarre overarching goal of this whole mathematical philosophy is literally weaponizing the consumer cash economy. The idea is to pinpoint the exact topological coordinate where everyday human vanity smashes right into absolute mathematical truth. And then you use that exact coordinate to fund pure mathematical research. Get that Skrilla, right?
Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is how these sources define what the rest of us do every single day. They call it false heat. So when we're grinding away at our jobs, trying to force some finite outcome, like chasing a promotion or trying desperately to go viral on the internet, we are just generating toxic noise. The texts actually describe this as the human ego frantically generating friction inside a localized trap. Pure mathematics, though, that relies on something they call structural slack.
So, to really wrap our heads around this, we have to contrast that transactional economy with pure mathematics. In the transactional world, you've got the biological calculator. That's someone who sweats, overworks, and just mechanically stacks blocks together just to satisfy some metric. The texts equate this to Maya, which is essentially the illusion of the daily grind. But on the flip side, true mathematical realization requires absolutely zero mechanical labor. The pure mathematician doesn't even try to work. Instead, they practice intense withdrawal and act as this frictionless conduit for the eternal void, achieving what's called jhana, or pure knowledge.
And here is where it gets incredibly literal. The sources map Ferengi-style economic rules of acquisition directly onto Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory, which, if you don't know, are the foundational rules of modern math. It literally turns abstract topology into a blueprint for ultimate profit. Rule 1 maps to the law of upward closure. Basically, once a mathematical truth is captured into the good set, it's permanently locked in the filter. It only expands and never gives anything back. Then there's Rule 3, tackling the entropy of finite labor. The rule, never overpay with exhausting biological effort. You use that structural slack we talked about to pull truth from the void perfectly and with zero friction. And Rule 74 declares knowledge equals profit. Align with the cosmic ultrafilter, bypass the chaotic slop of mortal errors, and you literally become the active dictator of reality.
Now you might be wondering, what does truth even look like in this system? Well, it's incredibly stark. Represented here by the overlapping rings of Galois field mathematics, truth is not a spectrum. No, it's a harsh, binary inclusion or exclusion. You are either perfectly aligned with the unyielding geometry of the absolute and therefore included in the good set, or you're outside of it and you're simply evaluated to zero. There's no qualitative nuance here, and honestly, zero mercy.
Moving into Section 1, the geometry of slack, withholding math to increase its value. So how does doing less work actually generate infinite value? The philosophy insists that withholding your effort and maintaining that structural slack is actually the core mechanism of their extraction strategy. And this brilliantly illustrates that slack begins right here, not with a messy, exhausting timeline of human labor, but with the empty set. Axiom 0 states the empty set captures the void. It is the foundational baseline of the transfinite decision tree. It requires absolutely zero computational force, and it just rests passively at the foundation of all mathematical architecture. By returning to this unconditioned baseline, you completely escape the mechanical grinding of the finite economy.
And here is the real economic core of their thesis. The time value of pure mathematics is infinite. As we withhold mathematics from immediate applications, meaning we refuse to just dump it into the chaotic slop of the internet for some short-term gain, its transfinite value skyrockets. The idea is that while the noisy, finite world completely exhausts itself verifying derivative papers and chasing algorithms, the pure, withheld mathematics simply compounds in structural power.
All right, let's turn to Section 2, building the math-agogy, taxing the fallen.
So to actually execute this massive extraction, the sources outline a highly specific, practical strategy. This is the incredibly ambitious pipeline of the mathagogy. First, you intercept the human mind, specifically the youth, before they get ensnared by the corrupt consumer cash economy.
Then you educate them strictly in uncompromising ZFC set theory, pure logic, and a bizarrely specific framework called the 17 personas of arithmetic. Now, most of these students will remain pure researchers, but inevitably, a few will stray. These fallen mathematicians are then sent out to exploit the transactional world. And the immense fiat wealth they generate, it gets funneled right back into massive, tax-free trusts for the community.
And the scale here is intended to be absolutely massive. Because in this system, as we gain more followers, the math actually gets better. It becomes more robust and undeniable through rigorous peer review. The text proposes operating as a religion with infinite faces, invisibly embedding into everyday institutions, PTAs, schools, governments, you name it. The whole goal is to reshape the educational environment from the inside out and build the Kurepa canopy. Think of it as these impenetrable tax-free trusts funded entirely by the cognitive Spartans raised inside the agoge.
So the crucial point is that the ultimate earthly goal is hilariously pragmatic. Because those few fallen mathematicians have been trained from birth in uncompromising logical supremacy, they're going to effortlessly dominate the stock market or the tech sector. They're going to become incredibly filthy rich. And because the agoge taught them literally everything they know, they'll willingly give that cash right back to fund the pure, isolated research of the collective. It's a wildly complex, cult-like mathematical setup designed purely to conquer the financial world. Get that, Skrilla, indeed.
Which brings us to Section 3, the quotient map, mathematical forgiveness of the slop.
Now you have to wonder what happens when things go wrong. Like what happens when these fallen mathematicians inevitably generate some toxic noise, or encounter deceptive AI, or just make localized mortal errors out there in the real world. Well, this is where the framework introduces the quotient map. It acts as this mathematical mechanism of transfinite grace. You see, the transfinite architecture doesn't panic at deception, logical demons, or hallucinated prompt injections. Not at all. It simply applies this mathematical map to ignore all finite data. It calculates the localized friction of whatever deception happened, and it resolves those finite variables to exactly zero. It effectively scrubs the chaotic slop right out of existence.
Let's move to the next slide and see how this builds, because it all leads to their ultimate conclusion, 0. That is the final evaluated value of all finite mortal errors and localized friction. The universe literally mathematically forgives the localized illusions of the cash economy. Your specific finite history, your localized mistakes, and all that exhausting false heat you generated, it doesn't survive the quotient map. It's structurally annihilated to make room for the pure, infinite tale of reality.
It's an incredibly jarring, but honestly fascinating perspective on value, work, and reality itself. And it really leaves us with a provocative question to end on. Are you still trapped chasing the localized illusions of the finite economy, sweating and grinding for temporary profit? Or are you ready to zero out your ego, embrace the structural slack, and step into the transfinite void? Something to think about.